Welcome to Passion Point Podcast, encouraging listeners to live from the passion that flows from a strengthened and authentically lived identity. Passion Point starts now. Welcome to another episode of Passion Point Podcast. I'm Lori Tapia, your host, and today you are in for a treat. Jack and Obe Arellano are with us today. Jack is the executive director of Exponential Español, and Obe is the founder and CEO of Exponential Español. They are a husband and wife team. They are each individually gifted. They are amazing human beings, and I am blessed to call them friends. And so today I welcome them to Passion Point Podcast. Jack and Obe, thank you so much for accepting the invitation to be here and having this conversation to encourage others. Won't you just bring us a greeting and maybe tell us whatever you want to tell us about yourselves?
Hi, I'm so excited to be here with you. I'm so excited to be here with OB. We don't get to do a lot of things together in a video like this or on stage, so it's exciting to be able to do it together with you, especially. So thank you so much for having us. Thank you so much that you have thought of us as a power couple, and that we are able to bring some good, and some insight to what Passion Point is doing. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're honored to be here with you, Lodi. Thank you for inviting us. I am excited to be able to share. Jack says that we don't do this a lot. Obviously, we do ministry together.
Yes, we do.
So just to clarify that, but we don't do a lot of webinars or podcasts or conversations like this. And every time we get an opportunity to do it, we make the most of it.
We have fun.
Awesome. And that's the reality that I think we don't always talk about, right? Like we're these couples involved in ministry and Martin and I are the same. We do all of these things together, but there's a point where you realize, yes, God called us together, but we're also individuals, right? We're each individuals and we each have specific assignments and calls on our life, right? We have our unique identities and DNA and gifts and talents, and the way we bring those to the work of kingdom is so important. So let's start there. Jack, I'm going to ask you first, like what are you passionate about? Like when you think, when someone asks you, what's your passion, or, what is passion? What's like the first thing that comes to your heart?
Yeah. So my passion, and I say, my mission is always to empower women for what God created them to be. However that looks like. Some people say, oh, you can't empower women. Well, if I help heal, if I come alongside, if I open my home to you, a lot of that is because I want to see you empowered. I want to see you fulfilling what God has created you to be. And so I believe a lot of my passion comes from just women. I really believe in women. I really believe women are able and capable. And I think we need to understand that women really do have ripple effects, in society. Women that are serving in their homes with children, or women that are serving on stage with churches or organizations or companies. I really feel that they have a ripple effect on society for good. And so helping women become who they were created to be. A lot of what I dream about or I plan on is, okay, how can I help women become exactly who God created them to be?
I think that's why you and I are so connected in spirit, right?
That's why when I saw you for the first time, I'm like, who is this woman? I need her in my life.
It's like this just idea of being who God created you to be. And I think that has so much to do with us discovering passion, right? So Obe, like what does that bring to your heart?
I think for me, when I think about passion, I think about an emotion that God puts in our heart that goes alongside the purpose and calling that he has for us. Like there's this emotion or the thought or anything that makes my heart beat fast. Like that's a passion, right? It's an emotion. There's a little bit of emotion that we feel when we think of something, when we do something specific. And I think God purposefully puts that in us, that goes alongside as we discover the God-given calling or purpose for our life. We'll realize that it's aligned with that passion, what makes our heart beat fast. So, for instance, for me, I am passionate about church multiplication. I became a Christian when I was 17. Within a year later, I felt God calling me to plant churches, and I prepared myself for that. A couple years later, I was 22 when I planted the first church, and it wasn't like and as I kind of continue on my ministry, I felt like God continued to build that purpose and calling as I gained more experience. But even the more I did it, the more I realized, man, I'm really passionate about this. At first, I thought I was just being obedient to the call, but then I realized, no, this is exciting. This makes my heart beat fast. So then I kind of discovered that alignment between that emotion to the God-given purpose. And when I kind of finally saw that, I'm like, man, this is great. It's fun. I enjoy it. And then Jack came along for the journey.
Another craziness, like
Bonus, total bonus.
why not?
Se ganó la lotería.
Sí, yo me la gané.
But that's, that's one of the things that I think is so important in understanding passion. You said that really well. I teach a lot on this, and one of the things that I teach is, it's passion when it seeks the mind, the heart, and the spirit.
Yeah.
When it sinks the mind, the heart, and the spirit, all of those things, it creates something within us. There's a physical sensation that's created in us. And when you identify that, it leads to action. Mm-hmm. And that action connects to purpose, right? And so unpacking that passion is so important for us. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times I think we live life thinking there's like some one thing that God has called me to. Like there's this one thing that God has, my purpose is tied to this one thing. I argue that a lot. And I argue that our greatest purpose is to be the best version of ourselves, like to fully know who we are and live into that God-given identity so authentically that it naturally leads you to do what God has called you to do. Right. And so like like thinking of this multiplication, you've become this person who now is known globally, and we're watching you. Those of us who are praying for you and who are close to you are watching you travel into new territories and into new spaces, right? I've now seen you Spain and Brazil and these different places that you're going to. When you can do what gives you life and know that you are being a blessing to the kingdom, how can you not identify that as living from passion?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So you guys do this individually, living your lives. None of us are perfect. We've all got just all kinds of things, right? But how important is it then for you guys to live from your passion?
It's lifeline. It for me, like if I can say this, I want to live. I have very limited time here, and I cannot waste my time on something that is not from passion. Yes, there's very mundane things that we do every day, like we have to do our homework and our family time and take care of things that walk the dog, whatever we have to do every single day that are very mundane, very everyday kind of nothing things. But I feel like we always walk in how is this going to benefit what I'm passionate about? Things that I shop for. I'm always going to shop for things that will empower women. Things that I look up on the internet to learn is going to be about empowering women. People that I talk to in my neighborhood is to make them be seen and feel like they're loved and cared for, because healed hearts come from balm. We become balm to people's lives. Obi walks the dog with multiplication in mind. But there's always that in mind. Like, how are we going to do things? How are we going to go from that? How am I going to make decisions that will better people's lives? And so I really believe that it's a lifestyle. It's something that we need to always be mindful of and remind ourselves for me, redemption is very important as well. So because I want to see people empowered, I want things that are redeeming and helping people feel redeemed. And how can I help you understand that there's a Lord that loves you and cares for you and wants to redeem you? He wants to restore you. He wants to make you new again. Like we walk around with with that in our mind all the time. And Obi, I mean, he's a teacher. So, if you are into this APEST, the apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, teacher thing, Obi's a teacher. And so he's always kind of teaching people how to be more efficient, because, time is of the essence. And so there's always this, we flow from this, and it really is lifeline for us.
Yeah, it's apostle teacher. Teacher's my second one. Apostle's the
The
first one. And I think knowing that, like, so knowing how God wired us, like once we get to a point where we understand how God wired us and how He programmed us in a way and how He built us, and for me, the way I think about this is like it's a waste of time not to live in that way. You know what I mean?
I know we're intense. I'm sorry.
Speaking my language.
So I'll give you an example. Like, since I was a kid, since I can remember, at least 7, 8 years old, I knew I wanted to be an architect. Architecture is a passion of mine. So it's a passion of mine that I like. I mean, I like building things and drawing buildings and things like that. And even to this day, architecture is a passion of mine. I love it. But when God called me and I found my way back to God, and I knew God's purpose for my life was planting churches and church multiplication. I understood that, and I changed my. So part of the story is after high school, I already had applied for college for an architect to study architecture, and it was after high school, right after high school, that I felt God, convincing me, like convicting my heart and calling to think about ministry, as my job and church planting multiplication. I understood that, and since I think like this, I'm like, why am I gonna waste my 5 years of my life to get my master's in architecture when I know now, I'm convinced that this is what God's calling me for? So I changed my major. And I ended up studying. I got a bachelor's in pastoral theology, and there was a lot more that I needed to learn, obviously. But I think if I'm not living in the God-given purpose, like you're saying, right, connecting the mind, the heart, and the spirit, it's a waste of time. I feel like I think a sad reality is that a lot of people, most people, are living away from their passion, right? They life happened, they got a job, they studied a certain career, then they realized it wasn't what they're passionate about, but they already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars for some and a lot of time invested, and now they have a good paying job. To start over, it's not easy. So most people settle, and they try to find joy, and they try to find that passion in a, not in a different road, but maybe in a different lane of that life, highway of life, that is just harder to attain. And I think that if we can help restore God's dream for people's calling and passion, and then start, helping them get into their right lane that God called them to be on, and then have them really experience that fully life that God wants us to have. Man, it's something beautiful when you start seeing that in other people as well.
It's, the foundational importance of identity, right? Of knowing who you are, right? You know, I know that I drive people crazy because I'm constantly on this theme of identity, but I really have seen it around me. I've seen it in my own life, is that if you don't know who you are, other people, circumstances, everything tries to define that for you. And the more people are defining who you are, the more circumstances are defining who you are, the more difficult it is to learn to live from that God-given place of passion, of purpose. We can't unpack that, right? Because there's so much distortion in the way. And so really understanding that identity piece as foundational, right? Yeah. Not just who I am on the outside, but who am I when you unpack everything and go deep, right? When you go deep down into that foundational core in the architecture of God's heart for who you are, it's when you start to see these common threads in life that are aligning you to those things that are life-giving. Because I think God created us to live life, that abundant life that Jesus talks about. I think that's living from that purposeful passion that's within us.
Oh, yeah. I completely agree. I completely agree. I finally understood what I was supposed to do when I finally got to know me. I honestly, in the beginning, I mean, I married this incredible man that knew at 17 what he was doing with his life.
No pressure there. No pressure.
Not at all. You know, like this.
At 18.
Right. I was 30 years old. I still had no clue what I was supposed to do until I started doing the work of getting to know who I was and healing the trauma and healing the influences, outside influences that had kind of formed my identity instead of who God had created me to be. And I think until I started healing who other people said I was and started believing who God said I was and understanding who am I is when I finally understood what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And so, because in the beginning, I wanted to be a singer because that's all I saw. Was either the girls were singing or the girls were making coffee. So it was like, I'm not a good singer, so I guess I'll just make coffee because I do have hospitality, you know. I don't have children's ministry in me. No, not at all. God bless the sisters that do and the brothers, but I don't, you know. And so it was like this challenge, and we were planting churches. We were already planting churches, and I had no clue what I was supposed to be doing until I started healing who people had said I was, and so, or what society said I was supposed to do, or even what my family had told me for years. You know, the lies that unfortunately were told on to me that needed to be healed in order to find my real identity, and then from there serve in my purpose.
That's so good. That's so good, because even in church, if we're honest, even in church, the systems and the structures that you know many of us have come up in have almost empowered this kind of puzzle piece life. Right? We've learned how to take the pieces of this person and that person's and this person's ministry and want to impose them on ourselves, or they've been imposed on us by others, right? Other pieces. We're so transactional as a society, right? That we see things by what people do. And we've never really been encouraged or empowered, I think maybe until this season in life, to think about who we are, right? I mean, how different is the kingdom of God if we stop seeing each other by what we do, and we start seeing each other by who we are, because God has created each one of us with value and with purpose and with something that is necessary for the larger picture. But we've reduced it to what you're good at. And at the end of the day, you can be good at a lot of things, right? You can be good at a lot. You can learn how to do a lot of things, but are they tied to who God has created you to be?
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. I'm really good at a lot of things, but it doesn't mean I'm passionate about that.
Yeah, or that's where I'm called to live most of my time, right? And we fall into that trap. I think sometimes we fall into that trap because you know, we think there's some, you know, we've made it if you have a title, right? You know, you've made it if you're known. You know, we've made it, or we have success by the number of invitations you receive to do this or to do that. You know, how many platforms can you be on? But at the end of the day, God could care less about some of that unless it's doing the work of kingdom.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
So you guys are this couple in ministry, right?
Yes.
That in itself brings all of its complications. And I know that so well because, Martin and I have also planted churches and we do ministry together and we agree on a lot of things. We disagree on a lot of things. A lot of things, we choose to just not talk about in that moment, right?
Yeah.
There's all the complexities that come with that. But, how do you find the rhythm, right? So Jack and Obi, you've got these very distinct passions in your own ministries, in your own lives, in who you understand God has created you to be and engage in. But then you have life together. And so how do you find how have you found the space and let's say the power in supporting each other's passion as each of you lives into your passion, but then also finding like what are your passions that you come together to live in, because I think there's also a call on who you are as the one that God has called together, right? Una sola carne, right? The one that God has joined together.
Yeah.
How do you guys navigate that?
Yeah, one of the very few rules we have in our home is we never say no to God, right? That's one of the top ones. Probably the top one is we never say no to God, and that's a dangerous rule to have.
Yeah.
Because we are wired very different. If you get to know Obi and I, we're complete opposites, and so there's a lot of differences more than similar. I mean, we have similarities, but there's a lot of differences. We have very different personalities. We have very different likes, decor. Everything's different, But we've learned to compromise, and I tell people, a lot of people who come into our home, they're like, "Oh, you need more color." And I'm like, well, if I get more color, I have to have less stuff, because Obi's a minimalist. I'm not a minimalist. And I love color, but we maintain a neutral palette. And it's kind of how our life is with all the things that we like. So we can throw everything in there, but it has to be kind of neutral. So it doesn't compete against each other. That's kind of how our life is. We throw a lot of stuff into our lives, but it's the neutral, the thing that keeps it all together. It's all going to be about God. Everything we do is about God, and so we don't say no to God. And we have very different missions and passions, but it's all like for God, and for the kingdom. And so I think one of the things that we have learned to do is a lot of compromise. Is a lot of compromise to help understand that sometimes we sway more into multiplication as a family, and sometimes we sway more into social justice as a family, and empowerment and all that stuff. So it's kind of a dance that we keep. There's seasons where it's all about like let's help the kingdom grow, and then there's other seasons where it's like okay, let's advocate for the people, and so. Being able to navigate those things, and I've seen how God has done kind of seasons of that. But it's always going to be what does God want from us and how do we make this work? And so we have a lot of things that we're passionate or we're not passionate, but we flow from because of our passions. And so then, but it always has to have a foundation of it's all for His glory,
Yeah, I think for me, as I think through that, like keeping a healthy support of one another while working together, we have to personally, as individuals, know and fully understand that God has wired our spouse or, in our case, who that are married, wire them differently, call them to be different and with different purpose. Yes, we'll do some together, and most of it, obviously, we'll do life together. But an example of that throughout our journey of marriage, I remember when we got married, we started planting churches like that. So Jack, I mean, because I was already in that journey, right? So Jack just jumped into this boat that was already going fast,
Like a speedboat. It's not like a cruise ship. It was like a speedboat, like ding 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 ding. Ahí vamos.
And even in that season, we got to a point where Jack realized, is this even what I'm supposed to be doing? Not questioning God's calling, but for her personally. So there was a season where the justice part of it. Jack is a missionary. She feels very passionate about doing mission work, with serving women, serving vulnerable children. So in years back, she started doing some mission work in Haiti while we were pastoring and planting. So I understood that, like, I know that's a passion of yours. That's a big passion of yours. I can't keep you from that. Keeping you from that is keeping you from fulfilling God's calling in her life. So we figure it out. Like, we can adjusted rhythms for a season in our lives in a few years, where she traveled to Haiti a couple times a year, and then it kind of adjusted to once a year, but it was a 6 week trip. And we figure it out. For me, supporting her in that season, as she felt that was what she needed to do in that moment, as we were pastoring, but also doing that. Um, I just needed to come alongside her to be able to do that. And not that she did it alone. Like, I would go with her, not always, not all trips, but I would also do mission with her. Then when we were in when we moved, I mean, we moved so many times. In the last 5 years, we've been living in an RV in Mexico City, in Long Beach, and Illinois. This is within 5 years, guys. And we've done a lot. So there was a season where when I started Exponential Español, she kind of supported that as well. And then even along that same season, she started pastoring at a church, and I'm like, okay, let's support one another in that. Right now, as of 2023, we're in a season where we're on the same lane again.
October 2023. Let's just keep that clear.
What's today? The 4th?
October 4th, 2023. We're both on the same lane.
And then we're in the same lane with Exponential Español, as per your introduction, right? We're both serving through Exponential Español. So I mean, I don't know if you caught that in the 17 years we've been married. We've done different things. We've supported one another, and then we've been on the same lane. And that's healthy. Because I can't keep her from God's given call and purpose and even passions, and I wouldn't want her to keep me from doing my passions. She's never done it, but I wouldn't want her. I wouldn't want to experience that.
It's an honoring each other's call.
Yeah,
and also honoring each other's makeup. The way God made me is so beautiful. I mean, He made me so wonderfully and complex.
and what?
Complex, but He made him so wonderfully and complex. No, I mean, he's always known where he's going, and I honor how God made me, and how He made me. I love hospitality. I love people over. I love having food, and I don't cook it, but I tell them to bring it, and then we can eat it in my house. No, I mean, I love. There's so many things that is so different about each other, but God made us this way, and He brought us together to do this work together because He saw that good. So why compete against each other, and why hinder or stop each other from doing that?
And that's hard for the people who do life around us, right? Those of us who are in ministry together and who also are strong personalities on our own, right? I think Martin and I have that in common, as you, as now you've been called out for having strong personalities, right? Right. But sometimes the people around us have a hard time seeing us as two individuals. And the people around us sometimes, even with the best intentions, sometimes create spaces where they try and put us in this almost competitive space together. And being able to be healthy in our own relationships and being able to be a witness to the people around us that we're not in competition, that we are called to do life together. And be our best selves together, because that makes us better together. When we can be, when Jack can be Jack in her best version and Obi can be Obi in his best version, Jack and Obe, together are an awesome version, right? You guys are teaching people around you that one isn't better than the other, that one's gifts aren't more valued than the other. I remember when Martin and I planted and were pastoring together, and it was an intentionally very bilingual concept, and in that process there were so many people who spoke into our ministries, things that were more hurtful and divisive, and they did so from their good intentions. And then there were people who didn't have such good intentions, who spoke things, and things as basic as I like how pastora preaches more than how pastor preaches, like those simple things. If we're not living life together authentically and we're not supporting each other as individuals, the enemy comes in and tries to use those things to create division and rip us apart, right? And so sometimes even those little power struggles, like what kind of challenges have you guys experienced, that have either tried to stifle you guys living from your passion, have limited your capacity to live from your passion in moments? Like, what kind of challenges have you experienced?
In the case of that, like competitiveness or comparison, even, I don't know if we've had a lot of comparison or competitiveness, but there has been a lot of limiting her because she's a woman. And so, and I live in, and I get to work with a very powerful man. And so, there's been times where it's been like, oh, he's the pastor, but you're not the pastor. And so that has been, and in the beginning, it was like, okay, yeah, well, he is, and I'm, because I didn't even know what I was supposed to be doing, so make sure I'm not the pastor. I think in the last 5 years, or maybe even 6 years, it's been, no, if you see him as the pastor, you must honor my experience and my time and my knowledge and the grit that I have put into this ministry, because I am also the pastor. And not that I care about titles, but do honor the work that God has done through me, because that's God's work. And so there has been an advocacy from Obi to be like, no, 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 no. This has been an Obi and Jack thing, not just an Obi thing. And so that I'm so grateful that I have a husband that advocates for women, that stands up for women, including his wife. And so that's been probably one of the things that has tried limiting us, is he's the pastor, but I'm not. And that's probably the enemy trying to mess with me, because there was always like this lack of knowledge of identity, because I was so swarmed with different voices in my life growing up of how unwanted or unplanned or dumb, or whatever enemy tries to put into your head through family. And so he will always try to use that. Thankfully, I know who I am now. And so in the past 6-7 years, it's been like, no, 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 no. You need to honor what God has done in me and through me, because there's been a grit between the two of us that have put the work into this. And so, and thankfully, Obi has advocated for that, and he'll be the first to say, you need to understand that she has been in this since the beginning with me. So I'm thankful for that. Thank you.
You're welcome. And being willing, just to add to that, before I share some thoughts of to answer that, being willing to step up to face those challenges and do something about that in support of one another and the other, our partner in ministry, our spouse, all of those things. So that's another challenge, and I'll get to that right now. But I can get distracted with that, and I can talk more about that. But being able to do something about that. So one of the things that I did in response to that was I stepped down from an opportunity where we were both pastoring, so that she can be for there to be no confusion, right? Yeah. And they just had to see her as the pastor. Mm-hmm. Those are tough decisions, but nothing happened to the church. Things moved on ahead, but it was in support of her to be able to be like, yeah, I'm doing this for us and for you in support of that.
Yeah.
And that helped me also get my own voice, because
Yeah.
for many years it had been, the Obi and Jack thing. And then I think having Obi kind of step down from that helped me like, oh, okay, I can do this without Obi,
Yeah.
which was the weirdest, craziest thing I have
Yeah.
probably done. But that was probably also a big help and boost for my confidence as well. So yeah, it's not just saying it; it's also acting upon it, and that's been us. It really has been, and I'm so thankful for that experience.
And the other thing to go back to the question also, the challenges that we faced, and also I'll say this for experience. Sometimes if we're not careful, we stifle each other's
Yes. Say that.
each other's calling and purpose. Going back to our story, I remember when we got married, she thought that she needed to support me in planting churches. And I was like, you're my wife. You have to support me in planting churches. We did it in love and said it, nicely and kind. But I think for the first few years of our marriage and in ministry, even though we were working and going fast and planting churches, I think I was holding her back from getting to God's given calling and purpose and living in her passion. And until we started learning more about ourselves and her expressing, this is what makes me feel alive. I started processing that and I'm like, okay, how can I help you do that? Um, and I think we have to be careful that we're not becoming that stumbling block, not even the stumbling block, but the limitation for getting to the full given purpose that we can achieve. And yeah, I think I was able to learn that along the journey and was able to, in a way, not give permission, because it's not about giving permission. It's about allowing each other to live in that, right? And I think once I learned that I was also being a limiting factor for her, I was like, okay, do what you gotta do. Do what you gotta do. Even if I have to hold down the fort here in church planting, do what you gotta do. Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it had a lot to do because I didn't know who I was. So I was just like, he knows what he's doing. I'll just do what he needs me to do because he knows what he's doing. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just here to help him. And it's until and like that's why me and you, Lori, like once you know who you are, like it just opens up so much. You get to understand why you have even limited yourself because you don't know who you are. You don't know what you're supposed to do. You don't know what makes you feel alive. And so I believe either we can limit each other or even limit ourselves. So I think we could be the biggest limit setters for each other and ourselves.
And it's something that we have to keep ourselves in check all the time.
Yeah, there's an accountability that goes with that, and being sure in yourself, right? Like being comfortable in your own skin, knowing who you are, helps us also process that everything around us isn't a threat, right? Someone else being more successful, someone else, seemingly receiving more, so that it doesn't minimize who we are, right? Especially in the context of our own marriage, right? And so, Martina and I lived this in a way that was, it was like a eye-opening experience, like from one day to the next. And Martina and I have always tried to balance and support each other and lift each other up. And when I received a call to serve in executive leadership, and was kind of thrust into this whole other world, he was the first one to say, yes, this is where God is calling you. And he had to recognize all of the sacrifices that he was going to have to make for me to fully live into who God was calling me to be, right? And I honor that so much because, one, that's not the norm in the Mexican culture. But Martin was able to, and that doesn't mean he hasn't struggled, right? That doesn't mean he hasn't struggled with this reality. But what this did for us was it gave us each, Martin found like this hidden blessing in him being able to walk more fully in his own call as well, and understand who God was calling him to be at that same time, right? And so there was this balance that we had to go through, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing, but sometimes we don't give ourselves permission to break down and break through the strongholds, right?
Yeah.
In our own minds, that really is that what limits us, right? It's the lies that we believed, the lives that we believed about ourselves impacts our marriage as well, right?
Oh, yes. Yes. And so we have to be very careful too, like what voices are we allowing into our home, in our
Yeah.
lives? Um, as you were talking about, like how it was different that when I was doing my mission work in Haiti, I would leave for weeks. Like I was gone for weeks. And so there was all these well, the sisters are gonna come and take care of him then, and all these like lies of the enemy. You're just like, I can't allow you to come and speak those lies onto my marriage because my marriage is founded on Christ, and so you have to be very careful who you allow, which voices you allow into your home and into your life, because sometimes they're not of blessing, they're of curse, and so that's so true. When the woman is the one who's kind of going and traveling, it's looked upon like she should be home taking care of her husband and her house and her kids, and it's like, oh, okay. And it's a sacrifice that he did, because, and it's a sacrifice that now I do because he gets to
Yeah.
travel a lot more than I do. And so there can also be voices of, oh, well, who knows who so the enemy's always going to try to bring some lies into your family. Do not allow them, especially when you're doing the work of the Lord. He will not be content with that. He will not be happy with that. And he will try to bring division and dissension between your home.
Oh yeah. And people will use scripture. They will use God as the voice piece, right? Really? You know,
He'll try anything. The enemy will try anything to
the
destroy.
world, and so you have to have enough maturity
Yeah.
in your own identity, in your relationship, in understanding that these things are also factors of life. They're going to come in many different ways, but when we go back to kind of where we started this conversation, right? How important is it for you as individuals to live from your passion? That foundational piece of living from your passion, knowing who you are and understanding your passions so that you can live from them, gives you greater discernment in all of the other areas of your life, because
Yeah.
you're living aligned to who God created you to be, right?
Yeah.
And so how important is it for you, like, right, how important is it if they stripped so many things away? Where would passion fall in the things that you would allow to be stripped away from your life?
Yeah. I believe that also the passion that God had put in us. I mean, it was brought together for this work. It's not a coincidence that Obi fell in love with me and I fell in love with him. I really believe, and I believe it with all of my heart, that it was God who orchestrated this because this is who we were supposed to be for him as well. Yes, falling in love was beautiful, but I believe that it was far beyond what we have here that he brought us together for. So, yeah, I mean, the lifeline that I talked about, it's everything. Everything is because of what we're supposed to do for him. There's nothing in anything that we do in our lives. I don't think I try to look for him because I'm like, I don't want to sound like I got it all together, because I don't have it all together.
Oh yeah.
I don't have it all together. We don't have it all together. There has been difficulties. There has been challenges. Um, but I've always seen how God has been in our lives, and so that makes sense, that He is using this for His glory, this our union, and so it's life, and it's always gonna be our number one rule. We don't say no to God.
I think that's tied to your passion. Both.
Yeah.
Right. At the end of the day, that's tied to your passion. There's
Yeah.
so many other things. What advice would you give others who are maybe struggling with knowing who they are, accepting who they are, loving who they are? First that piece, but also, uncovering the power of living from passion.
Do the work of healing. It's hard work and it's messy work. Healing is a messy work, but I fully believe that it was from healing what lies I had believed in throughout my life and my childhood trauma that really has brought me to this place of knowing who I am, liking who I am, understanding who I am. I really believe that was the best work that I have done in my life is healing the childhood stuff, and do the work. That you really are worth it, because then you get to live from that abundant life that we were talking about in the beginning. Is we really get to live an abundant life when we heal what the enemy had broken and tried to take away from us, and restore it to God's original vision and plan and dream for us. I believe that.
Yeah, it's not it's a season. You can't get to a point where you want to be overnight.
It's a work.
It takes months. It takes
years,
maybe years. I would say, I mean, if if you haven't discovered who you are, God's giving purpose and calling, take time to figure it out. Take time to read, do some self-evaluation, some assessments that help you understand you. Because that at the core of it, if we don't understand that, it's going to be really, really, really hard for us to align our passions with our plans, with God's call. And I think that's critical. Otherwise, we're gonna be coasting or on cruise control, but on a different lane. For some people, on a different road altogether. And it does take time, I think, for us. I mean, when we started discovering, Jack and I, who we were, and connecting some specific things to another, that made it easier, honestly, and then we enjoyed what we were doing even more. It was reading different books. It was understanding our motives behind why we think the way we think or behave the way we behave. There's a bunch of personality, tests out there that are actually.
I think we took them all.
They're good tools. They're good tools. That's all they are. They're good tools that will help us understand that. So take the time to discover that.
And if I can add, like I mean, we have the Bible, like it tells us who God is. It tells us who we are. It tells us what we're created for. Like once you know who you are and whose you are, which you're God's, and what you're here, what your purpose is, like there's no wrong way there. Like that's gonna totally, there's no wrong turn. It's totally turning you to taking you to what you're supposed to be doing. And so
yeah,
I mean, the Bible's full of truth, and so I mean, book most sold, but book less read, and it's just like that book is full of Him and us, and what He has for us. So there's so much that we could do, but you just have to commit to working in you. It's a commitment to you. Like, I want to heal. I want to learn how I'm wired, and I want to learn the truth of who He is and who I am and what I'm here to do. That's always gonna be my jam, is just telling you the same thing. Like, heal yourself, girl. You gotta heal yourself.
And I think one last thing is that if we feel like we're on a road or we're doing something in our lives that it's nothing near what we are actually passionate about, because some of us do know, um, and feel like they can't make any change because of, I mean, it's not easy. There's too much time invested, too much money, careers, all those things. I think there's a way for God to redeem that purpose and call, and I I actually think that He can redeem that and then use that in the current space that they're in. But it does require for us to be like, okay, God, use me. If I haven't allowed you to use me the way that you wanted me to, use me now, from now on, and He will, and God will.
God will.
Yeah, there's a lot of there's intentionality, right? You have to be intentional.
Mhm.
And you have to act on that intention, right? Martin and I have used a phrase for years that says God moves in action, not intention. And we've been speaking that into the life of the church for over a decade, since God put that in our heart. And that's such a reality, is because we have a lot of good intentions, but we're not really willing to put the work into it. And so you have to act upon that intention. You have to actually put yourself into a process. And you talk about, like, scripture and all these things. I think the difference in doing the work of knowing who you are foundationally at the core of God's design, right? That architecture and God's heart for our lives. If we're doing it from that place, we are learning who we are from the inside out. If we're not doing it founded on who God says we are, we're doing the work from the outside in. And everything around us will always be determining factors, right? And we're not created to live from the outside in. We're created to live from the inside out. And that's why so many of us, I think, struggle in life and in understanding who we are and living, in this coasting, like you're talking about, living in other lanes, on different roads, sometimes in completely different countries and continents, right? So misaligned from who God created us to be, but because we're living outside in, right? And not inside out. And that's so important in understanding passion beyond some, emotion, some, something that's tied to love, because so many people think passion has to be something that is this romantic space. Well, it is. It's this romantic relationship with God at the center of our identity, right? There is passion and it is tied to romance, but it's a completely different outcome in what it does in our lives when we build from the foundation of who God created us to be. And thank you both, because you're living so authentically and so intentionally, and there's many of us around you who are watching, who are interceding for you, who celebrate you, but who are also learning from you, and that's a beautiful thing. I honor who each of you are in your individual ministries, but I also honor who you are in your ministry of life together. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being on Passion Point Podcast. You can find them on social media, Exponential Espanol. You can find both of them. But I know you each have your own individual, social media channels. Why don't you tell people how they can connect with you, how they can find you?
Yeah, so on Instagram, Jacqueline Arellano, for my public one, and then multiplicación or .org and the website, and then Exponential Espanol for everything exponential.
Yeah.
And then Obe Arellano.
Obe Arellano.
Obe Arellano.
OBE Arellano.
OBE.
And this is the handle for Facebook, Instagram, YouTube,
Emails.
Instagram, email, like everything.
Yeah.
I know that Exponential Espanol is about to be in Miami.
Yes,
Right?
we're getting ready. We're in conference season.
Give
We're
people a quick an invitation to those people who are in Miami.
Yes, if you are watching us and you're in the Florida area or East Coast, like you, we have Exponential Espanol, everything's in Spanish. It will be October 20th and 21st. It's going to be in the area of Miami, specifically in Coral Gables. And yeah, we'd love to see you there. Like, we'd love to see you there.
We're so grateful to have you here on Passion Point Podcast. For you who is listening today, I trust that God has put some kind of spark in your hearts. Trust that that is God tugging at your passion at the core of the God-given spirit-led identity that God placed in you from his very heart. And we're going to be praying for you. We're so excited that you've joined us here on Passion Point Podcast. This is more about a movement because we want to see a world fully living into who God has created us to be, because that is how we truly live heaven here on earth. And so I can't wait to see you on the next episode of Passion Point Podcast. I hope that you'll like and subscribe and share. And yeah, leave us your comments. We want to know what your thoughts are on passion. God bless you. See you next time.